Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I wanted to talk about three prize Pokemon in the Pokemon TCG, and specifically the new Mega Pokemon coming back to the game. I say they're coming back, but the Mega mechanic is completely different. We're going to talk about the old Megas a tiny bit, and also, more notably, the three prizes we've seen in the past and the new three prizes. And the reason I want to make a video on this is because, I mean, they're new cards. I was like taking a look at new cards. I'm not going to be looking at new reveals. I will say, at the time of recording this, these four megas, Mega Caramel EX, Mega Absolute EX, Mega Mawile EX, and Mega Abomasnow EX were technically revealed, but like not really, right? You can see these pictures here, or not. Like you can't really see them, so I'm not talking about them. They look based on like the numbers you can read, nothing special, no abilities there. So not too much to break down, I guess. I mean, we can't see them. If they end up being something that's super crazy and completely changes the thoughts on megas, then this will be kind of awkward because yeah, that would be unfortunate. But ultimately, so far I'm gonna talk about the four megas we have seen, like actually seen, not these four. And I'm assuming these are within a similar realm. Though we'll talk about like how much they could change the megas and what that would do. But ultimately, I've heard people say that megas are going to be bad for the game, and I've heard this a lot. I heard it a lot when megas were first revealed, and I know people like to kind of exaggerate things on YouTube to play it up because it gets more views and stuff. I'm not going to lie, I like to do that too, but I heard a lot of people saying megas would like destroy the game and like ruin the game, and that just to me doesn't make any sense. And today I'm going to tell you why, and talk about some misconceptions with three prizers slash the new megas, especially because the mega Pokemon we're going to talk about. A lot of people in the Pokemon TCG community haven't actually played with them much, or sorry, the three prizers have not played with them. People have not played with the megas because they're not out. But three prizers in general, a lot of people haven't played with it that much. And I've played with them probably more than most people in the community, and I think I have some insight here into them for people who aren't as familiar with them. But again, I'm not talking about these. We've seen four so far: the Mega Venusaur EX, Mega Lucario EX, Mega Gardevoir EX, and Mega Latias EX, which I have talked about separately. But again, we'll be talking about in this video some, though not too much. But first of all, we need to take a look, I guess, at the older Mega Mechanic and compare it to the newer Mega Mechanic, which are very different. The new Mega Mechanic are just like the current EXs that aren't Megas, like Venus, or no, I'll pull up Gardevoir EX because that one people know more. It's a Stage 2 EX that gives up two prizes and has an ability and stuff, and it has less HP, it has 310 HP, and has an attack that's not that good. But ultimately, that card is, it's a good card. And this Mega Gardevoir EX has a bunch more HP. It has 50 more. And you'll see higher HP bumps with the Pokemon that naturally have lower HP here. So we see Mega Latias EX. It's a three prize basic here that has 280 HP. So this is not the highest, well, it is the highest HP basic in the game, but it's not like a new record. It's tied with Team Rocket's and Mewtwo EX there, so it's not like something unseen or unheard of, but it is still very high for a basic Pokemon. And again, Mega Gardevoir EX is very high. It is, well, it was the new record for HP. Mega Venusaur EX actually surpassed it there. 360 is like 20 higher than something like Palafin EX has 340. There is like a bunch of stage 2s for that as well. But ultimately, the HP is a bit higher. It's not like this is absolutely absurd, though. I mean, we see Garchomp EX with the tool Cynthia's Garchomp EX with the tool Cynthia's Power Weight attached, then has 400 HP. So this is like high. It's quite high, but it's not something absolutely absurd either. So people sometimes talk about power creep as well with these cards, and power level is, I mean, yes, they are stronger, but they give up three prizes, right? So ultimately, well, as I said, we'll talk about these cards later at the end of the video more specifically, but they're not that strong. They're okay. If these were two prizers, they'd be probably really, like, probably overpowered, but they wouldn't be, like, if these were three prizes, they wouldn't just be, like, absurdly broken, I don't think. I'm not sure. They'd be, as I said, very strong, but I could see Pokemon printing these as two prizers, which kind of shows that as three prizers, they're not, super strong. We don't know what's going to come with them, and again, I will talk about these more specifically, and I think they'll see some play. I actually said Mega Latias EX. I thought that was really good. I think my opinions dropped on it a little bit. I think it's still pretty solid. And then they are the same stage as the normal Pokemon. So Latias is a basic, Mega Latias EX is a basic, Gardevoir is a stage 2, Mega Gardevoir EX is a stage 2, and so on. So that's how those are working. It's a little weird thematically comparing it to like the older Megas, which evolved from the regular versions of the Pokemon, or I guess the regular version of the EX. I think it would have been um, a little better thematically if Mega Gardevoir EX evolved from Gardevoir EX. It is like a stage 3, which is kind of weird, and I understand why they're not doing that. I've heard some people say that that's the reason that they're not doing it. And while that could be true, ultimately they have done Pokemon that are functionally stage 3s in the past with like Pokemon Break as well. So they could have done that, but regardless, they're not doing it, and I don't think it's an issue. I also heard some people say that would make them more balanced. But I mean, these cards just aren't that strong. They're perfectly, I think, perfectly balanced the way they are. Maybe even a little weak. But again, I will get into them. And I do have some issues with these megas. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think they're perfectly designed. But in terms of balance, I think they are very well balanced. But then let's talk about the older megas a little. As I said, they evolved from their regular EXs, which are all basic. So I think this is more interesting than them all being the same stage. And we're going to take a look at a bunch of different 3-prize mechanics in this video and mechanics in general. And all the other mechanics are all the same stage, not as each other, but within themselves. Like all the megas are the same stage. We'll talk about all the tag teams, which are all the same stage, and so on. And so these are all, well, the stage is megas, but they're functionally stage 1s. They do have this mega rule, which says at the end of your turn when you evolve into them. A lot of people point to this as the balancing factor, and like it's like kind of true. I mean, it certainly makes them worse, and the older ones like were just kind of bad. And then they added spirit links to the game, which are a tool that removes this rule that say they don't end your turn, and then you just attach a tool and evolve. I'm personally not a big fan of the older mega mechanic because I should probably pull up like not that art. Because at that point, then you could just attach a tool and it kind of removes the whole mechanic, which is like kind of weird in my opinion. Also, the Pokemon were relatively boring. They had one attack and more or less no abilities. Some did have Ancient Trace, which is pretty much just an ability. And there were actually some dual type ones as well, which is kind of cool, I guess, but ultimately not like a mega thing. And they were like not super strong. They were actually probably fairly balanced. I mean, maybe Rayquaza, quite strong here. Again, the one printed in Roaring Skies, a strong deck, but most of them were kind of not so good to pretty bad, honestly. I saw a top 10 video, and at the end of the top 10, like number 10 wasn't a super strong card. So ultimately, these were, okay in terms of balance, but not, anything insane, and in some ways overshadowed by other cards within their era as well, which is okay. It's not a bad thing. Ultimately, though, the mechanic is very different than the new mechanic, so they share like the same name, I guess. I mean, it just says M, so it's not even the word Mega, and it's a different stage, and it's a bunch of different things, but it is like the same video game mechanic at least, so figured I'd mention it, but ultimately they're not very similar to each other outside of the name. But then we come to the first 3-prize mechanic, which is the tag team mechanic. I will say tag team Pokemon, there's a lot of things to dive into with these. They get a really bad rep for, like, a lot of people say they ruined the game. I will say they were super overpowered. They had substantially higher, or not substantially higher stats than all the other GXs during the era. They were higher than all the other GXs during the era, but they were like higher than the stage 2 EXs as well, right? So you look at Mega Latias EX. Mega Latias EX does not have higher HP though than Gardevoir EX. It has the same HP as Pidgeot EX, but that's like way on the low end. So ultimately, you're going to see the HP levels are higher, but they're not, kicked up as much with the new Megas compared to these tag teams here, where Pokemon's like trying out their hand at 3-prizers, and they failed, kind of, because they're super overpowered. They really dominated the game when they were in it. I mean, later on, we'll talk about VMaxes in just a second. VMaxes were also very good at trying to reach the power level of the tag teams, and I guess Pokemon just overtuned them. A lot of people say that they do it just for money. I mean, yes, they do things that they do for money, but ultimately they make most of their money from the collectors anyways. I guess big numbers are good for collectors, but ultimately, I don't think they meant to make him as strong as they did. I think they kind of messed up by accident here, and kind of just kept rolling with it, and eventually kind of figured things out by raising the power level, though. So tag teams are a big thing, responsible for power creep if you look at one specific mechanic. And power creep isn't it in itself isn't the end of the world, but ultimately the other cards at this era weren't balanced towards these tag teams. The regular two prize GXs weren't balanced on that, and then the single prizes were definitely not. I mean, single prizes are still kind of lagging behind the meta game for the most part. You see like Ethan's is a pretty solid deck in the game, though it's not even that good. It's like okay, and people are talking about it like it's like one of the best single prize decks within like I was gonna say the past 10 years. Not sure exactly when that stretches back to, but it's certainly up there. I gotta imagine. And that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. That's a sign that the decks aren't super weak. But ultimately, or are super weak. But ultimately, the tag teams are they were too strong. However, in the way they played, they were okay. In terms of three prizes, the way that it changes games, it can make them faster. Specifically, if you're playing three prizes against three prizes, it makes the game faster. And that's something that not everyone likes. Some people talk about fast games like it's always bad and slowing the game down is always good. And I think we've learned specifically from the card Badu that that's not true. Badu is a card that isn't so fun. It slows the game down, and that's about it. I mean, it's very good as well, but it's not. It's really annoying to play against, and you don't get super far with it either. I mean, it's super weak in terms of damage and HP, and so it just kind of sits there and slows things down and helps swing the game in your favor a little bit. And I mean, again, it's a very strong card, but it's still a card that isn't going to be carrying your deck. It's not, the main attacker or anything like that. It's mostly just kind of boring, strong but boring, and that's a card that slows the game down. And there are other cards. I guess Monkey Dory in some sense slows the game down as well, which I don't think is super fun. I think it's kind of cool, but yeah, that's not slowing the game down as much. But it is like healing and causing, I guess, longer turns at least, that aren't creating big combos. So I would say it's slowing the game down in a different sense here. But obviously, three prizes, speed the game up because you need to take six prizes to win, and giving up three prizes is half of those prizes. These aren't one-shotting each other, really. I mean, they kind of can, but that's not really what you're aiming for. You're aiming for two shots, but this is what you're aiming for in standard in a lot of different formats in general. So you're going to be taking, if you just say you're two-shotting, then that's going to be 4 attacks, and then you've won the game. Versus in standard, if you're two-shotting two prizes, then it's 6 attacks. So you're looking at a faster game. And I don't know what the sweet spot is. I'd personally say 6 turns or 6 attacks is like okay. I could see it a little bit longer, but everyone has their own preferences. However, if you're playing a single prize deck, and if single prize decks were good against tag teams, you have something like Pikachu and Zekrom EX or GX here. Or no, I'll pull up Reshiram and Charizard tag team GX here, a little bit more HP. If you were two-shotting this with a single prize deck, which isn't like that hard to do, theoretically it shouldn't be that hard to do, then you should win, right? You'll win the prize trade. You'll take 3 prizes every 2 turns. Your opponent will take 3 prizes every 3 turns, so you should win the game. The reason that single prize decks are, of course, worse is, one, they're just undertuned, so they're just bad. That's probably the big reason. But on top of that, they need to set up more Pokemon. So every time you're knocked out, or every turn you're knocked out, and then every time you're knocked out, you need a new Pokemon with new energy. So it's more deck slots and recovery, empowering a Pokemon, and it gets awkward. And also, you might not be knocking this out in 2 turns. Also, 2 prizes against 3 prizers. If the 3 prizes one-shotting the 2 prizer, you'll take your 6 prizes with 3 attacks, and then the 2 prizer, if the 2 prizers two-shotting the 3 prizer because it's probably hitting like 200 damage, doing way more damage with the second attack than you need to take the knockout. But your first attack coming up a bit short, then you're going to be taking all your prizes in 4 turns, so you will be behind. But again, when we look at the newer 3 prizers, they're not really one-shotting 2 prizers. I mean, I guess they kind of are one-shotting 2 prizers, but they're not that much stronger. I mean, 2 prizers in the game are also one-shotting 2 prizers, so these are a little bit stronger. It depends what you're up against as well. But Megalod SDX is doing 300, which isn't even one-shotting something like Dragapult EX, or I was going to say Barney's Grimmsnarl EX. I mean, you're technically not, but in practicality, you probably are with Frostlass. But again, you're strong. This is a strong card, but it's not going to be something that's necessarily that much stronger than all the other 2 prizers. Like comparing it to Raging Bolt, I think they're in some ways, or I guess comparing it to Pikachu EX, that's the best comparison for this card. That's a 2 prizer, right? So it's pretty similar there, and it gives up one less prize. So again, that's not something that I'd be worried about too much with the new three prizers there. I will say that the Pokemon ADP or Arceus, Candela, Palkia GX was really bad for single prizers. This card was a card that had its like absurd GX attack, which just let you take extra prizes the entire game, which was really bad for single prizers. If you look at a Pokemon like Iron Hands EX in standard, that's not good for single prizes, assuming it's taking the one shot. Like if you're up against I don't know. I don't know what single prize decks people are playing right now. They're not really playing any, right? There's like Ethan's, and there's some other ones like Ancient Box, I guess, but realistically, you're not gonna see that many single prize based decks. But if you're playing something like you got a bunch of Drakelokes or something on the board, then Iron Hands EX is really annoying. But this is like Hands EX, except you don't need to power up 4 energy a bunch of turns in a row. So again, these were overtuned, but Pokemon's kind of learned their lesson from that, as I said, based on the power levels that we see with the newer cards. And the tag teams weren't that unfun, in my opinion. And the reason for that is because they have depth within their cards, they have at least, well, I was going to say they all have two attacks. Mewtwo technically doesn't have two attacks, but like it does. So that's an outlier and not what we're talking about today. Really cool card, but not today's discussion. But they all had two attacks. The one was a GX attack, which is once per game, so you could reach a point where you only had one attack, and a bunch had three as well, or an ability and two attacks or something. So they had depth to them, and also their GX attacks, which are again once per game. However, they had two different effects with their attacks. You could do a weak attack, and then you could also do a strong attack, which is kind of fun. So essentially, something like Restroom and Charizard GX had four different attacks on the Pokemon, which is really interesting, and gives the card a bunch of depth, which is kind of cool. And again, they're kind of interesting. There aren't too many of them, and they pushed out most of the other cards because they're too strong. But in terms of their own design, ignoring the power level, they're all right. Then we have the VMaxes. This is I'm going to go through VMaxes in three different parts. We'll talk about probably less as we go on. Actually, no, we'll certainly talk the least about the final era, but we have the first year of VMAXs. Most of these aren't very good, but there are some that are very good. Notably, Eternatus VMAX. I guess I'll mention Dragapult VMAX as well. I imagine a bunch of people aren't super familiar with it. It's kind of like Dragapult EX. It's actually weaker, but it's still a very strong, or was a pretty strong VMAX. The first really strong VMAX. And you look at this card, and it's like Dragapult, right? It's a stage one Dragapult that gives up three prizes with like the same HP, and it's weaker as well, but it is in a slightly weaker era. And again, was a weaker card within the meta game. Not a bad card by any means, but not like the best deck in the game for most of its time, or arguably the best deck in the game for most of its time in standard. But Dragapult, this card it's okay, right? This is not something that's some big red flag. If you think Dragapult's fine for the game, I think Dragapult's annoying. I think most people think Dragapult's kind of annoying. But the difference isn't the three prize aspect to it. It is a stage one, so it's easier to set up than Dragapult EX. However, again, it gives up an extra prize, which is a really big deal. Giving up an extra prize is balance. Sometimes people just ignore the fact that it gives up an extra prize and say this is broken. Well, yeah, I guess it's broken if you ignore the fact that it gives up an extra prize. That's like saying an ace spec it's like saying enriching energy is broken because it draws you four cards as your energy attachment for the turn. Yeah, that's theoretically really good. If you had an energy that did that just as your basic energy or as a colorless basic energy, that would be broken. But it's not. That's not what the card does. You're just ignoring half the card, and in reality, that card's just really bad because it's it has this special mechanic that makes it worse, and so that's what you look at with three prizers here. And then you look at Eternus VMAX. Eternus VMAX was also very strong. Again, these cards were right after the tag team era, and these cards were trying to compete with that new power level. You do also see that with single prizers, like, for example, Charizard from Vivid Voltage, a single prize deck, which wasn't super strong, but was okay, I guess. And also something like what was another good single prize deck? I can't think of too many. Maybe Mad Party. You see these single prize decks that are stronger, and you see like everything is just kind of stronger to match the new power level. Eternus VMAX that was the strongest attacking Pokemon, or the strongest three prize attacking Pokemon of this year, or printed this year, because it's able to do 270 for 2 and also has 340 HP on a functionally a stage 1. Also, its ability increases your bench, but you need a full bench to do that max damage there. This card was very strong, and it's kind of what people look at, and I think they don't like because it's kind of boring as well. And this first year of VMAXs were kind of boring. They got more interesting as time went on, though. I guess the third year is we'll talk about that. But the first year here is pretty boring. Not like horrendous though. You see two attacks on these cards sometimes. What attacking ability? There's not again too much to break down here, but I did want to talk about them. They were like kind of they weren't awesome for the game, but they were all right, I guess. They fit within the tag teams. A lot of people didn't like them again because single prizes were bad, but they are still bad. So that's a fair thing to be annoyed about, but that's not going to change. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like. I do hope they become better, but it's not just because of the three prizers. Then we come to the second year of VMAXs. Again, we do have a problematic VMAX here, unfortunately. Mew VMAX. Mew VMAX itself isn't actually like super good. I mean, it's pretty good. Mew VMAX isn't the card. Mew VMAX, the deck is super good. But Mew VMAX, the deck is actually Mew VMAX with Genesect V. Genesect V was the reason this deck was good. It allowed you to, oh, this is expanded, but it doesn't really matter. It allowed you to draw a bunch of cards and also was like kind of your main attacker. It's kind of, I mean, VMAX is the Pokemon using the attack, but it's copying the attack of Genesect V. So Genesect V really was the heart and soul of the deck. VMAX was very good though, and was how the deck actually. Yeah, it was just those two Pokemon, Genesect V being the more important one, but VMAX still very important and kind of gets, again, a bad rep as a Pokemon that's just like super broken, and the deck was super broken, and was really, really, I guess, annoying because it was so strong, but that's not reflective of most of them, and not just reflective of three prizes, and also the deck, its biggest weakness was the fact that it was a three prizer. And so that was actually, again, giving up three prizes is really bad, and there are decks that could take advantage of that using certain counter cards. We look at other VMAXs though, like the Calyrex VMAXs, which I think are pretty cool cards. Ice Rider is a more, I'd say, fair attacking Pokemon in the mold of, honestly, it kind of reminds me of Cynthia's Garchomp PX, where you have you're like decently tanky, you have two solid attacks. The first one's like kind of whatever. The second one, you discard energy, do bigger damage, and so it kind of reminds me of that. They're kind of different. It's not a great comparison, but just the first one that popped into my head. We also see more abilities like Rayquaza VMAX and Duraludon VMAX and Shadowfire Calyrex VMAX had interesting abilities here. We see Rapstrike Urshifu VMAX with a really interesting spread-based attack, which was very strong. Admittedly, a little, I don't know if I'd say overpowered, but overpowering two single prize decks if you don't have the right counters, and it could also kind of go through those counters at times, those counters being those bench barrier style cards. Again, you see that in Dragapult though, so it's not a three prize thing, it's just a spread thing when not accounted for. Overall, though, the VMAXs of this era were better, and VMAXs were really the main decks that were played at this time. Almost all the top 10 decks were VMAX decks, I'm pretty sure, which wasn't amazing for the game because they're kind of similar. I've talked about that some, actually. I think I made a video a little while ago where I talked about this era of the game where there are some really interesting decks in terms of engines. With the Inteleon engine, I was a big fan of that. But again, the three prizes are fine. Nothing crazy going on here. But they are cool enough. Certainly not a big red flag with them just being three prizes. Again, they were a little overtuned, but what exactly are you comparing them to? They're better than the single prizers, but of course they're going to be better than the single prizes because that's how Pokemon tends to work. Then they're better than the basic Vs as well, but the basic Vs were mostly previous evolutions to the VMAXs anyways. So like you shouldn't really be expecting previous evolutions to be stronger than final evolutions. And there were some that weren't previous evolutions that were just Vs that didn't evolve, and some of those were pretty good. The Pokemon was focusing more on the VMAXs, so it wasn't anything super crazy. And I will say most of the VMAXs of this era were pretty solid, so they're able to make mostly good cards, which is cool to see. Then coming to the final year of VMAXs, I will actually mention, I think between those 2 years, we had V Unions. V Unions were actually really like this is the weakest three prizers we've seen. I think I don't know. I'm not sure if they're weaker than the final year of VMAXs, but I think they are. But V Unions are super clunky. That's their main thing, to the point where they're almost impossible to get into play, which is like really bad. I'm just gonna say that. But regardless, that's it is what it is. They're kind of cool. They have some fun aspects. I couldn't really make a video about three prizes without mentioning them because they are a three prize mechanic, but they're also kind of irrelevant, honestly, unfortunately. They have some funny things, and if we really want to, we could dive into them. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with them because they are really crazy, really funny. Mewtwo V Union was pretty good. A card that was a control card and a spread card and a really strong attacking Pokemon. But ultimately, they were a similar power level to the VMaxes. They also gave up 3 prizes and were almost impossible to get into play, which was yeah, kind of unfortunate for them. They did not have the support pieces. And expanded, they're okay though, so that's kind of cool, I guess. But then we come to the final year of VMaxes. I think this is kind of going to be what the Mega EXs are going to be like. I will say that Mega EXs are this is the first set of Mega EXs. Oh, I do actually want to mention I watched a video by YouTuber Whimsicast about Megas, and in that video, they said that this isn't like it's kind of weird that they're increasing the power level, which again, they're not really increasing the power level, but they're like, they're increasing max HP, so that's like kind of a fair point. But they said it's weird that they're doing it in the middle of a like generation, except it's a new block, or it's a new like era, so that it's not the middle of a generation. The Mega, this is the set Mega Evolution, by the way, terrible set name, but it's called that because it is the Mega Evolution block. So yeah, the Scarlet and Violet era is done, essentially. This is not completely different. We still see EXs. They're just kind of keeping it, kind of like actually what they did with X and Y, which kept the EXs, the different EXs, and then added in Megas as well. But we see in the last year of Sword and Shield, we saw VMaxes that were, I'm saying year, I'm talking about the years in actually Japan, that there's some runoff to the next year, internationally, if you're wondering about that, or specifically regulation marks if you want, more clarity there. But I'm breaking again into the 3 years. And in the third one, there weren't many VMAXs printed, and Pokemon was focusing more on V-Stars, which were 2 prizers, and V-Stars were pretty strong as well. And 3 Maxes kind of got pushed out of the game. I will say a lot of these are kind of boring. Some are kind of interesting. Regieleki VMAX is kind of cool. I keep seeing this, and I keep being like, why is there an Orbeetle VMAX? And it's not Orbeetle VMAX. But Regieleki VMAX, really solid card. Actually, currently working on a video where I'm going to talk about, or not talk about this, but I was looking at this, the every Galar Pokemon's best card, and Regieleki VMAX is a solid VMAX, and it's kind of interesting. Saw some play with some different decks, so kind of cool there. But overall, these cards were pretty well balanced and kept in check by the fact that they are 3 prizes. So keep in mind when you look at these cards, if the broken stats aren't everything. Well, I mean, I guess broken stats are everything, but broken like high HP and high damage isn't not everything. If you look at a card like Aggron VMAX, this card kind of terrible. It actually ends up seeing some play, but 270 damage through 30 HP looks absurd. But it has 5 energy to attack with, right? That's bad. I feel like most people like are aware of that, but then you see something like Mamoswine EX, and Mamoswine EX is just I don't know why I hate on Mamoswine EX all the time. It's not that bad, but it's certainly not good either. And some people, when that was revealed, said it was broken, despite the fact that it was obviously not that good. And I think that's the case with the Megas here, because let's take a quick look at them. Mega Venusaur EX has an okay ability. It's kind of like Armarouge. It's maybe a little better. I'm not sure. But I mean, Armarouge is a single prizer stage 1, so it's actually a lot worse on the fact that it's a 3 prize stage 2. But then you have your attack here, which is also not super impressive. 240 damage for 4, and then you heal 30 from this Pokemon. Not super strong either. If this was on a 2 prizer on a regular Venusaur EX, I still don't think it would be insane, except for maybe its high HP. It also does have synergy with the supporter card Wally's Compassion, so maybe it could be okay there, but I don't think it's super good. Then we come to Mega Lucario EX. This one's kind of cool. First attack, Accelerates some energy, does some damage. And then the second attack, it does bigger damage. And then you have Premium Power Pro and Item Pro, which is really good, but I don't think it's going to boost Mega Lucario to being super strong. Also, Hariyama is meant to be paired with it, which is like okay, but I don't think it's some amazing combo that's actually going to really see play. I think the cards could see play, and it could see play together, but don't expect it to be super good. Then we come to Mega Gardevoir EX. Mega Gardevoir EX is like a fair tech within Gardevoir EX. I think it will see play. I think it'll see less play as time goes on, but I think it's an okay addition to the deck. It allows you to take one-shots, which is like fair. I've heard some people also say that it's broken in Gardevoir because it lets you take one-shots, but that also doesn't really like make that much sense because you can already take one shots with the guard four. That's like what the deck does. It depends exactly how you're playing it, but that's generally a main part of the deck. And then this isn't super tanky. I will have some damage on it, probably. Maybe, I guess it depends how exactly you're doing it, but it certainly could have damage on it. It's possible you can get all it off with Monkey Dory and not end up accelerating that much, but you might, and it's not, it's a fair attacking Pokemon. The first deck also, I don't think really has a place. It's an acceleration attack, which is kind of cool, but ultimately probably not going to be very good. But the second attack, again, it could be solid within Gardevoir EX. Also, Gardevoir EX will be rotating a little bit after this card comes out. Then we have Mega Latias EX. Mega Latias EX here does 300 for 3. It's pretty similar to Pikachu EX. You could argue which is better if they were the same stage, but or same. They are the same stage. If they were the same type or like you have the same number of prizes, but ultimately this Pokemon is probably not quite good enough because it gives up 3 prizes, but could be really fast with Latios EX or with Latios as well, and actually Latias EX. You could end up with like a really strong and fast attacking Pokemon, but you are also functionally weak to Psychic with being a Dragon type with Lilia's Clefairy EX in the game, and this card just has some downsides as well. So I think all these cards are balanced, and I will say basics, 3 prize basics, can be a little scary because they're going to be hopefully or presumably relatively easy to set up, and then they're also cards that are really strong, and then you can run over your opponent before they get set up. I don't think Mega Latias EX is like that, and you lose all the energy when you attack, and again, you are giving up 3 prizes, so if you're knocked out twice, you lose. So if you get a 2-prize knockout turn 1, that doesn't mean you're going to win. I mean, if you're against Raging Bolt and you knock out a Raging Bolt turn 1 going second, if they just attack twice and knock you out twice, they'll still win. So it seems kind of crazy to knock out a Raging Bolt turn 1, but it doesn't actually win you the game doing that. So again, being a 3-prizer does put it at a disadvantage. I think a lot of people say 3-prizers are going to be broken because they've been broken at some points in the past, but that's not necessarily the case. I wanted to make this video, though, a bit of a longer one here where I talked about a lot of different things because there's a lot of things to break down with these different mechanics. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all the good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.